All right, we made it to Yom Kippur. We're in confession mode, so let's join in. I have a question for all of us. Raise your hand if you have said the following to yourself or someone else, maybe it was me, in the past year, 2, 3, I'm a bad Jew. I'm not that religious. Or my favorite, I'm Jewish. Hey, thanks for your honesty, folks. So let's dig in to this statement of quasi-guilt. What does bad Jew or not Jewish enough mean? Does that mean you don't celebrate certain Jewish holidays? Does that mean you don't keep kosher? Does that mean you feel guilt that you grew up conservative but you intermarried? Are you mad your child went to Chabad in college? When you drive around on Friday night and you see Jews dressed in white and black and you go, oh no, I'm not those people. Or you feel weird going into a kosher market because it's not really you, but they have the best challah. Okay. I get this feeling, this worry that we are less than what we are supposed to be, do, feel as Jews. Reform Jews and Jewish adjacent people often feel. That's a term. I did not expect that to be a laugh line. Sure, there you go. Reform Jews and those Jewish adjacent, they often feel an authenticity gap. I think back to a year in Israel during rabbinical school, hearing the sounds of Shabbat songs carried out of open windows on the voices of those who marked Shabbat very differently than I, who refrained from work very differently than I. Knowing that to so many of the observant Jews in the holy city of Jerusalem, that I and my colleagues devoting ourselves to a service of the Jewish people, that to them we would be considered secular or less than. Over time, I learned to realize the importance of defining myself not so strictly in terms of the other. I learned to quiet the negative self-talk, broaden the ways I think about myself, and talk about myself as a Jew. And having heard this kind of talk from so many of you in these past years, I think it's time for all of us to work on it as well. From traditionalists to reformers, from the Hasidic to the Litvak, to Ashkenazi and Sephardi and Mizrahi, to Rabbinite and Karaite, to the conflicting philosophical schools of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael, Jews have never looked, never talked, never acted in the same way. We've always understood that there are many ways to interpret our tradition and engage in this wider world. Take the story of Chanukah. The books of the Maccabees make clear that the Hanukkah narrative was as much an external fight with the Greeks as much as it was an internal fight to determine how much influence Greek culture should have upon Jewish life. And it wasn't just then. There have been Jews of every age, we Reform Jews included, who are willing to filter tradition through the lens of contemporary values. Then and now, there have been Jews who look differently, speak differently, think differently than others in our Jewish family. This is a good thing. The diversity that we add to the Jewish story has as much to do with our longevity as do the hardline, insular Jewish voices in our tent. Were we all to look the same way, the Jewish people arguably would not still exist. You claim I'm a bad Jew. Even in jest, I say we enrich, we enliven the Jewish story. Tomorrow morning we read the important Torah of Parshat Nitzavim. And in it, the text goes out of its way to name and include every stratum of society as part of the Sinai experience. The rabbis of the Midrash go even further to include each Jew who existed then, now, and well into our future. Every Jewish soul and every person who casts their lot among the Jewish community, they don't just stand at Sinai, they are rooted there, always. In other words, you and I are necessary. You and I are part of the story, and no amount of judgment from yourself or from others who would seek to deny that fact should stand in your way. I worked as a chaplain intern at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And one day I sat with a Jewish family whose child was sick, and I asked the parents about their sources of support as they helped their daughter navigate her illness. I expected them to talk about their religion or their religious community. But they answered me that the source of their strength came from emunah, literally from faith. But I came to realize that this faith that they spoke of really was pointing at something more complicated. See, from the inside, Jews don't talk about the what of religion. We speak about the why of belief in something larger than themselves, maybe God, maybe the community. But it underpins the tangled web of ethnicities, practices, values, and beliefs that we call Judaism. In my question to this family in the hospital, I assumed one thing about what religion meant, and I fell into a trap that many Western-oriented Jews have navigated for the past 250 years. See, for over 2 millennia, various writers and thinkers have been trying to define what religion is, but come up with very different answers. And Jews have largely stayed out of the fray because we know the answer is more complicated. Around 1750, the Rabbi Moses Mendelssohn, the grandfather of Felix, Rabbi Moses Mendelssohn began to use the term religion in attempting to claim to the intelligentsia of Enlightenment reason that Jews deserved a seat at the table. He claimed Jews need not be a separate, barely tolerated group, but they could be integrated as citizen individuals in the public square, just as long as we limited our expression of individual beliefs, our religion, in the privacy of our own homes and in our community celebrations. German Protestant thinkers adopted this idea for their own political reasons. A few decades later, the Jews of Republican France relinquished their corporate Jewish identity in exchange for French citizenship, and here we are, 250 years later, in an intellectual hole, trying to understand the encompassing tapestry of Jewish life simply as a function of what we believe and do in the privacy of our own homes. But we know this is not enough. Even in our modern and secularizing world, where some old theological language does not match our beliefs, this intergenerational enterprise cannot be reduced to individual belief or one person's version of public practice at a particular time or place. Judaism is the confluence of what the Israeli philosopher Dr. Michael Rosenstein would say is divided into Judaism, Jewishness, and Jewry, all of which we can tap into or distance ourselves from according to our own particular journey. Rosenstein defines Judaism as the scope of theology across time and space, including faith claims about God, Torah, Israel, the grand order of the universe. This is what many of us would call the religious part of our tradition. By contrast, Rosenstein defines Jewishness as the encyclopedia of customs, languages, practices, and culture. And many of us in this room tonight find our place here. It generates the conversation among those interested and inspired by Jewish athletes, politicians, thinkers, and entertainers, among those who are fascinated by the Holocaust and those inspired by Israel, between those who are on Team Latka and Team Hamantashen. And it animates our call to social justice and how we see the world. Finally, Rosenstein says, we can engage on the level of Jewry. This is the sense of peoplehood and affinity and community that is as likely to happen at the Hollywood Bowl or the Amundsen on a Friday evening as it is to happen here in this sanctuary. It's the sense of safety, perhaps, that we've cultivated over centuries to be in the same space as people who can speak our language, claim some common history or experience. We have so many more ways to feel confident and proud of our expression of this tradition and its values, but we discount those interests or awareness the moment we say, I'm a bad Jew. Don't just take my words for it. This diversity of expression was affirmed by a recent Los Angeles Jewish community survey, the largest ever commissioned. Although many were bracing for data proving that organizational and synagogue engagement is declining, which it is, there are other numbers that remind us that the sky is not falling. The survey tells us that on the whole, Jewish community engagement and confident Jewish identity is on the rise. And those individuals who identify as ritual Jews are just as likely to say positive statements about their own Jewish identity as those primarily connected with organizations that are Jewish. Put plainly, a strong Jewish identity has nothing to do with your observance level. I share this framework of Judaism, Jewishness, and Jewry with you because I'm ready to have a more proactive conversation with each of you, any of you, about what it means to be a member of this people. I'm ready for it to have a richer vocabulary or ranking than simply good or bad, because our people has too rich a tradition, too deep a well of wisdom, too long a history for our self-assessment as Jews to be simplistic and flat. Because you are not simplistic, and neither is what you value. Case in point, when I hear these words of self-criticism as a proxy for these are the rituals I don't do, or these are the Jewish laws that I break, or it's this community of religious Jews that's foreign to me, or I know there's things I'm supposed to believe but I don't. In the very next breath, you're telling me that you've accompanied a friend to their cancer treatments, that you've shown up for dozens of weddings and funerals, that you do pro bono work at your job, that you participate in social action across your city and your country. And I want to scream, this is Judaism. These are the significant ethical mitzvot known as the 10 Commandments, the rabbinic 10 Commandments. They're found in our Siddur and in fact on the very ark that stands behind me. These beautiful, ethical, personal acts of kindness that you already do, they are Judaism. They are its authentic expressions to us and to the Jewish individuals whose lifestyle may be very different than our own. It's time to claim our identities and the things that we do as Jewish without taking it for granted. Claim the aspects of Judaism, Jewishness, and Jewry that mean the most to you, with their joys and their oys. This is not passive, however. You can't just check the Judaism box by having brisket every once in a while. This is also not about defining yourself so that you can pass as culturally ambiguous. Identifying and naming your points of connection with our tradition, it carries stakes and weight. Sometimes that weight is in the form of anti-Semitism or judgment, but that cannot be a reason to relegate your Jewish connection to an afterthought. It requires something of us because for most of us, our Judaism is not necessarily visible on our physical selves. Many of us carry other identities we cannot hide or remove, and we understand the stakes of what it means to hold these realities in the public sphere for good and for challenge. Owning your Jewish identity means moving away from apologizing and moving into a space of pride. It need not be reserved for those who perform Jewish ritual in a particular way, but for anyone who acknowledges when Jewish value and identity emerges in the simple everyday action. How we treat the unhoused person on the sidewalk, how we reach out to someone who has lost a loved one, how we celebrate Jewish artists and athletes, how we feel when we hear about Israel in the news, how we work to be the best versions of ourselves, honoring our Jewish values and soul traits. Yes, We all, myself included, could have done more to engage our Judaism in the past year. But let's not dwell there. Add it to your confessions. The gates are open. Instead, let's have an honest and nuanced conversation about how you claim a Jewish identity that is all your own in a world where sometimes it feels challenging to do so. We've become so accustomed to ethical monotheism or the spiritual but not religious that we may forget how distinctly Jewish our lives actually are. From our encounters with those around us, the foods we eat, the way we show up for others, the way we pray, the way we disagree. Jewish wisdom and tradition is there to guide us. So let's name it together. Let's own our identities and find ways to push ourselves out of complacency or feeling not enough. The shofar reminds us each year that it's time to wake up, to alert ourselves to what can be. Affirm your Jewish authenticity, and I hope claim your place in the Jewish collective community. Because the messy, complicated, ever-evolving mixture of tradition, history, culture, and peoplehood is for all of us. Atem nitzavim. I stand here today, as do you, as do you, as do we all, adding our distinct threads to the tapestry of our tradition that transcends space and time. I belong here exactly as I am. And so do you. Gamar Chatima Tova.